Thank you so much to the International Center for Community Land Trusts. Thank you, Cohabitat and Urbamont, for the invitation to present about El Caño and to make this CLT that has worked in Puerto Rico reach other places in the world and see that example that we have planted here, so that somehow it serves as an inspiration in your respective countries. So this is the agenda. To have some order, we're going to speak about the historical development of the Del Caño communities. We're going to speak about the adoption of the CLT. We're going to see how this instrument has been used for regularizing the communities, so-called informal communities, without tenure, without ownership to the land, and about citizen participation and how citizen participation is the key for this project. And then a little about the development of this project for the benefit of the families that live there. The land is ours. You must have seen this picture in some of our works. This is one of the residents of El Caño, and that's the feeling of the people that have lived there for many, many years, and they feel that the land is theirs, although it was a public land. It didn't belong to any private individual, and it was water also. The Del Caño communities have been settled in San Juan, Puerto Rico for 90 to 100 years. One of them, called Barrio Obrero, has already celebrated its 100th anniversary. They settled there in the place. Now I'm going to show you a map for you to have an idea. They settled there as a result of the migration from the rural areas to the cities. These were persons with very low income. They had no housing, so they settled close to the places where they found a job. And I think that doesn't only happen in Puerto Rico. I think it's a global phenomenon for the first 20 years of the 20th century. The Del Caño communities, when the first settlers settled there, was in the outskirts of San Juan. Now the city has come on them. The city has grown, and now the communities of Del Caño are located in the middle of the city of San Juan. So they settled there. They built their own houses because the government didn't have the ability to provide any. And when the land was filled, those settlers kept pushing towards the sea, and they kept pushing towards the sea. So the sea was filled there with land, and they created solid grounds for houses. And that's why they have that feeling that the land belongs to us, because they built it. There was no land there in the past. It was only water. Here you can see the picture. This was one of the communities of Del Caño Martín Peña that was located to the west of El Caño. In the case of the CLT Martín Peña and the 7 communities that make it up, they are located to the east of El Caño. But this is a good representation of what was there at the time in the early 30s, 40s, 50s, and I would dare say even in the 60s, there were still houses on the water. And in the other picture, you can see the historical development. Here, this was the area of Del Caño. It was populated, and then in 2002, basically there was no water left. It was just land. As I said, in the area of Del Caño Martín Peña, now there's a place that is surrounded by the best opportunities for the community of Del Caño Martín Peña. It's a great location, good public transport, working places, universities, shopping areas, service areas. So today, the communities of Del Caño moved from being in a remote place in a marshland, because it was really a pipe, as el caño is in Spanish. It played an environmental function, and it served a role in the area of the mangroves. But today you can see the yellow area you see here. Those are the communities of Del Caño Martín Peña. This is our area of work. And what happened with the other communities of Del Caño that I told you were located on the west? Well, those communities disappeared with public policies related to the new phase of San Juan, or we have to eliminate these suburban areas. Those were the policies in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. The government of Puerto Rico had this policy that they had to eliminate the outskirts from the city of San Juan and in other places of other cities in Puerto Rico as well. So they displaced the communities, they displaced the people, and they told them that those places where they were living were not suitable for living. They were not suitable for human settlement. So the communities were removed, the people were displaced, and then they built houses there. They arranged the space, they installed the infrastructure, and then what was built there were houses that our low income people could not have access to because of the price. And in that same space where the communities had been displaced from, the government itself created what we call today convention centers, places for concert halls, very different from what they said to the communities, that it was not a place that was suitable for human settlements. So now in 2002, the communities of El Caño, the communities that make up the community land trust, they were living in these conditions. A little water, still very highly polluted, without oxygen at all, but the houses were still very modest at that time in 2002. So what happened in 2002? It was crucial for Del Caño because the government people, the public policies, looked to El Caño and they said, oh, that area is damaging it's hurting the face of the city and we have to put an end to it. Besides, it's necessary for Del Caño to be dredged, to be restored with the knowledge we have now. Del Caño is part of the estuary of San Juan Bay, and the estuary of San Juan Bay, that's where most of the economic activity comes into Puerto Rico. So at the beginning, in the late 90s and the early 2000s, it was seen as a probable water way to promote trade in the city of San Juan. However, the government had that perspective, but the communities were suffering this. That area was fully flooded with polluted waters, and it flooded the houses of the families, even when it was not raining. If you look at the picture, it's not cloudy here. It's a sunny day, but the conditions made it this pipe to be overflown, and flood the houses. In 2002, when we started with the project of the Caño Martín Peña, that I'm going to explain later on, still at that time, 39% of the houses reported in a census at that time that their houses had been flooded between 1 and 20 times with that polluted water in the previous year. So that was in 2001. So those were the conditions that people there had to live in. So the government announced a project for dredging that area. And that project for dredging that area implied the removal and displacement of the people because there was no other way of dredging the area other than moving the people away. And there has always been a tradition there of community participation. They were very well organized. So, what happened when they started hearing about the new project of dredging the area? They approached the government and they told them that if the government didn't count on them and if that project was going to imply their displacement from their houses for so many years, they were going to oppose the project. So, as a result of their insistence to participate, they found some open ears, people that were willing to hear about the need to participate. And that is where the project of the Caño Martín Peña started. They worked together to create a plan for comprehensive development. And within that comprehensive development plan for the area that they worked with the government, they found that the land held by the community was the best use of that comprehensive development plan that they had worked on. That development plan was not completed overnight. That comprehensive development plan took 2 years to develop with the community, and then it took a few more months for the government to approve it. But what is important about this plan is that its content is basically everything that the communities and their leaders had in their vision. That was to have their communities recovered and rehabilitated, but with them living there. That the urban process or the rehabilitation process should be enjoyed by them as well. Those that had created that land, those that felt the owners of the land. So, as part of that concept of this comprehensive development plan and the land held by the community in order to do the works, they started seeing what kind of ownership or tenure they needed for those works to be a reality and for them not to be displaced. And also to rehabilitate the area because they understood that it was a space that needed to be environmentally improved for the benefit of the communities and of all the city of San Juan. That's how they started looking at models. And finally, we reached the community land tenures, trust, sorry, the CLTs as they are called. Why did we consider that model or that instrument? Because it precisely contains the movement that was present in the area. First, community participation. Nothing without the community. We had the land and we wanted to retain it, but not as individuals, but collectively, where everybody could make decisions about those lands. And also the trust of keeping that land with the community so that they stay there for years, so that they could have affordable housing in the long term. If you've been to San Juan, You know that our city is one of the most expensive in the world. So, what happened? How did we do that? How did we manage to have that happen? Well, also, there were discussions at the community level, and we said this has to be done by law. We have to use public policy approved by the legislators and by the governor. So this bill was drafted considering all the things that the community needed and also look into the future. So that bill created the CLT, the first one in Puerto Rico. We knew nothing about CLTs at the time. And as we had to work with the infrastructure, and this was going to require a lot of money for the infrastructure and for the rehabilitation of the area, which is a federal work by the US government, then the corporation of the liaison project of the Caño Martín Peña. It's a public corporation. It belongs to the government. And within that bill, they recognize the G8 as a community group that was responsible for making sure that what was in the development plan was truly done, that the CLT complied with its commitment to keep the land for the community, and that the corporation of the Del Caño Martín Peña project also did its infrastructure work, um, do the dredging with the US government, but without any displacement. So this is a balance that is established by keeping the land with the community. The G8 is made up of 8 of the communities that were in the area of the project of El Caño Martín Peña in what we know as a special planning district of Del Caño. That is the 7 communities. Here you can see a representation of the comprehensive development plan, how they organize their communities to move from an informal settlement, as was the case many, many years ago, to an organized community as it is now. So this trust, this CLT, was a great decision made by the community because it ensures that the dredging is done. It makes all the infrastructure projects that are needed to maintain the area continue. And also, the families that were there from the very beginning can stay and can enjoy that rehabilitation of the space. And in the future, there will always be affordable housing in the city of San Juan. So let's move to the next. Here you can see how we worked on this. These are the characteristics of this trust. The characteristics were explained in each and every community of the Caño Martín Peña, emphasizing those areas where there were no title to property, to the land. That was basically 50% of the families living there. So through that law that I mentioned, they transferred to the trust around 78 or 79 hectares of public land where people were living. That land that was transferred to the CLT through the law 489 from 2004, people were living there already. They were living on the lands of the trust. So it was a collective land now. They were all owners of the land, and individually they were owners of their houses. They were not losing anything, they were winning. So we all like having a title to the land, and to know that this house is mine and it's under my name. Well, in El Caño, through a deed on the right to the surface that can be registered in our property register, everything is contained in a deed. It says there that the person, the resident that lives on the trust land, owns the structure and can use the land as if it were their own for 99 years. And of course, those that were already living there are not paying anything for that right to the land. But now they've won the fact that their house is registered in the public registry. It is recognized by a deed. They are all collective owners of the land under the deed, and it can be passed on to their heirs. They can put a mortgage on the houses because we know how it works. It's in our civil code. Of course, we have to consider the laws in each of the countries. But in our country, the right to the surface is a right that gives a lot of value and a lot of rights to individuals that have it. In the pictures, you can see some of the residents signing their deeds to the surface of the land. And today, there are 248, a little over 248 members that have their rights. More than 155 deeds have been signed. And in those areas of land where there's still no houses, we do temporary arrangements with the families that would like to develop there some vegetable garden or have some space for their cars, but without damaging the land. Each family that receives the right to the land also receives this plaque that says, "My home is safe with the trust." That's the level of trust that they have on this instrument. And they see it as a space, as a way of having dignity, security, trust, modesty. And it's a reminder of the fight, a reminder of the fact that we get together as a community, we can achieve a lot of things. In September 2017, please let me know how I'm doing with the time. In September 2017, Hurricane Maria uh, arrived in Puerto Rico. We had a big devastation with Hurricane Maria, but it was precisely in the area of El Caño, Martín Peña, with the CLT and with the assistance of a lot of people, even at an international level, including the International Center for CLTs, we were able to work together. And the organization we had as a trust helped the aid flow through the trust. And that work is not done on its own. It's not an office. It's not a space where somebody comes to work from 9 to 5. No, this is a community, and we're working all the time with the youth, with the elderly, in literacy projects. And giving this sense of belonging and doing a lot of work for people to feel rooted in their land. And we don't have to make a big effort for that because the feeling is there. The communities participate in everything. This is a picture of the work done at El Caño, the dredging of the area. And after 20 years now, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, speaking of the dredging. And these are some of the pictures. All these concepts of what will be done and what is being done with El Caño is all worked with the members of the community. The trust also has to develop housing for those people that are affected by the dredging because we don't want them to leave. We want them to stay there. So the trust is providing them with houses. And when the houses are built, we look to the future. we look to climate change as well. Many of the houses have water connections, solar panels, and they are raised just in case because in case the sea level goes up, they are protected if there's some flooding, but it will no longer be polluted water. It will be flowing water. The houses are raised to prevent houses from being flooded. If you want to have more information about the trust, you can use that QR code. And this is some of the literature we have at the center. There you can find more information about this CLT and many others around the world. Thank you so much.